So I want to just start off with a topic that was top of mind to compensation committees 1 year ago, just exactly a year ago. Clawback policies required to be adopted by listed companies. Do you see companies using policy criteria that's more expansive than the listing requirements for their clawback policies, such as expanding the population of officers subject to clawback, or including time-based incentive compensation or bad conduct that doesn't trigger a financial restatement? In other words, going beyond what the SEC and the listing agencies are required.
The honest answer is no. No. It's a question I think we ask ourselves, should we?
Yes?
And so you kind of go through that process, but I think you always kind of find your way back and said, it really doesn't serve you well to go too far beyond what the requirements require, sort of, and just stay in that fairway and, sort of assume that if something bad happens, then we'll take it up later.
Yeah.
I don't know if y'all see something different, but that's been my experience.
It's a little bit different in the energy industry locally, because there definitely is lower prevalence of going beyond Dodd-Frank requirements within the energy industry. I think in large public companies, like if you look at a cross-section of the S&P 500 like we do in our governance survey every year, close to 80% of companies left in some kind of voluntary clawback that they had previously that has some expanded, either a trigger for misconduct or other components of pay or other employees beyond those that are covered under the Dodd-Frank requirements. I agree. I think whether you go beyond Dodd-Frank or how quickly you do is going to depend a lot on your shareholder views. So BlackRock, for example, has said that they would prefer to see clawbacks that include triggers for misconduct that causes material harm to the value of the company. Glass Lewis has said something similar. They're very focused on triggers that go beyond just restatement. ISS is a little more focused on including other components of pay besides performance-based. But in any of those cases, you'll check the box if you have the Dodd-Frank policy, but you won't get credit for a robust policy. Whether and when that becomes important to you will depend likely on your shareholder base.
Thank you. Another topic in the headlines over the last year has been non-competition agreements and the FTC final rules imposing a broad ban on those. While those rules have been subject to a judicial injunction by federal courts in Florida and Texas, nationwide injunction, but the courts have been in Florida and Texas taking that action. On October 18th, the FTC filed an appeal against those court decisions. So I want to ask you, Mark, how much importance do you think companies and boards place on enforceable non-competes? And is this a topic of concern for compensation committees generally?
It is a concern. I think that, honestly, yes, everybody sort of is concerned. I mean, I look back on my own career, right? I didn't have one in Halliburton and allowed me to jump to Weatherford. Halliburton was not very happy that I could do that. So, I mean, I think it's important to them. I know that. But as we've had discussion, particularly, when you're going through a industry consolidation like we're experiencing in the E&P business and elsewhere, having some level of non-compete, and the corollary is non-solicitation, which can be almost more valuable than the non-compete. This is sort of keeping, employees from moving around or allowing somebody to come and poach, sort of senior executives or high potentials are very valuable to a board in order to create not only a retention tool, but also just making sure that there's, good behavior when people jump ship.
I mean, I think from a compensation standpoint, they are very important. I think about two things primarily. In the current environment, with all the M&A that we have going on, they have a very potentially valuable, in dollar terms, impact on 280G and excise tax gross ups and so on. So they can be a very helpful offset to avoid excise tax treatment in the context of a transaction. Also, from a compensation standpoint, when somebody retires and you want to allow them to continue to vest in equity, treat them fairly when they leave, having something like a non-compete or non-solicit to offset that or provide some kind of post-termination service to shareholders can help justify that. And ISS and Glass Lewis have put down ISS really mostly have put down a marker over the last few years that if somebody leaves voluntarily, including retirement, and you enhance anything about their compensation on the way out the door, we will recommend against say on pay. So a non-compete is a way that you can help address that and also give something back to shareholders.
Thank you. Yeah.
Nothing different. I absolutely agree. They're handy when you need them. And like Mark said, Halliburton was not happy when he left.